In this video, I thought I would walk around my backyard orchard and show you some of the fruit trees that I have growing in containers. Due to the lack of planting space in my yard, I decided to use containers to extend my planting area. If you have a limited planting space, as I do, and you're considering growing fruit trees in containers, I hope you will find the info in this video useful. I'll start with my Hass avocado that I have growing in this wooden container. This tree was purchased in May of 2017. It was basically just a whip, standing a mere 27 inches in height with minimal side branching. It came in a 9-inch pot and was up-potted several times before transplanting into the container it's in now. It's been growing in this container for nearly 2.5 years and has put on a substantial amount of growth. It's about 6 feet in height. It doesn't have much side branching as I would like. I haven't cut the central leader on this tree because I'm waiting for it to get to a height of about 8 to 9 feet tall, so I'd like a little bit more height on the tree before I cut that central leader. And as soon as I cut the central leader, it should start to put out more side branching. At least that's what I'm hoping for. Anyway, the avocados you see here on the tree started to develop back in April of last year. This is the first time that it's produced a crop. Back in 2019, it started to produce some avocados, but they all eventually dropped when they were about the size of a pea. However, this last bloom, it managed to hold on to a fair amount. I've already harvested several off this tree. In total, there were somewhere around 20 to 25 avocados. They are fair size and the flavor is excellent. It's done really well growing in this container, and as you can see, it's put on quite a bit of new growth, and the leaves are looking pretty healthy. This is one that I wish I had more planting space in my yard. I definitely put it in the ground, but just don't have the room, so it's gonna have to stay as a container grown tree. I also have this Mexicola avocado. This one was purchased in April of 2016. It was standing about 45 inches tall when it was purchased, but it too was basically just a whip when I bought it. It was up-potted a couple of times before going into this 22-inch container, which it's been growing in for just over 4 years now. A couple of years after purchasing this tree, the majority of the branches started to die back. I wound up removing it from the pot and replaced some of the soil with an improved draining soil mix. The tree recovered well and put on a good amount of growth. Last season it produced a large amount of blooms, but only one avocado set. Then in early January it started to produce another heavy set of blooms. this time around it managed to set a larger crop. There's about 20 or so scattered throughout the tree, and I'm fairly sure that these are going to hang on and reach full maturity. So it should be a pretty good harvest. Next up are my grapevines. I have 3 varieties growing in these half wine barrels. All of these grapes growing in these containers are best suited for winemaking. They have a thick skin and contain seeds. They can be eaten fresh off the vine, but the skin is not edible as they are with most store-bought grapes. However, they are extremely sweet with a much better flavor than any store-bought grapes I've ever tried. These grapes have been growing in these containers for about 4 years. The majority have produced a fair amount of grapes for the last couple of years. This first one started to develop flower buds in late April. It has several clusters that are starting to form. This next one started to develop flower buds in late April, early May. Doesn't have that many clusters so far, but it does have a few forming. I'm sure it'll develop a few more within the next several weeks or so. And this last one also started to form flower buds in late April, early May. It doesn't have that many flower buds developing, but I'm sure this one will develop more clusters in the weeks that follow. Next up is my Pakistan mulberry tree. This tree has been growing in this wooden container for about 1.5 years. It started to form berries in late March, and I started picking fruit off of it in late April. I've been picking a few at a time each morning, and it still has a good amount left on the tree. The berries are fairly good size and packed with sweet flavor. You can pick them as soon as they start to turn red, but the sweetest flavor will be on the berries that are almost black in color. they seem to be the best tasting. And this is my Starfruit tree. I bought this one about 4 years ago, and it's been up potted several times. It was recently transplanted into this wooden container a few weeks ago. It's produced several crops, with the largest being about 25 or so. And that was while it was growing in a 15-gallon container. The fruit is a good size and excellent flavor. I'm hoping now, I haven't had a crop yet off of it since it's been transplanted to this wooden container, but I'm hoping that this next season it'll put on a heavier crop now that it's in a bigger container. And next is my Rio Red Semi-dwarf grapefruit tree. I purchased this one a little over 5 years ago. It was a really young tree, and this is a dwarf variety, so it hasn't put on a lot of growth, but it is doing well. And this is another one that was recently transplanted into this wooden container. It's looking a little bare now, but it is putting on some new healthy leaves. Here's a clip from last season when the tree was growing in a 22-inch container. It managed to produce a good amount of fruit. I was able to harvest several off of this relatively small tree. And the grapefruits that it produced were pretty good size. This is another one that I'm hoping will do better now that it's been up potted into a larger container. And here's my Australian finger lime. This tree's been growing in this 10-gallon grow bag for about 2 years. It's looking bare because of some strong wind damage. I recently went through and cut the tips off of most of the branches in order to encourage some new branching and leaf growth. Shortly after tipping the branches, it started to push out several flower buds, which are now starting to develop some small finger limes. I don't think the majority of these will reach maturity because there's very few leaves on the tree to support any fruit development. There is a good amount of new leaves that are starting to develop, so maybe some of the buds that are still left on the tree that have not flowered will be able to fully develop. Last season it did produce a good amount of limes. I'm not expecting too much this season though. We'll see how it does. These are my Jujube trees. They have been growing in these 20-gallon grow bags for over a year. Neither has produced any fruit so far. Last season, they both flowered but failed to set any fruit. This one here started to bloom in early May, and as you can see, it has a good amount of flower buds. Every branch has a pretty good amount on them. It's scattered throughout the whole tree. This other one recently started to bloom. It doesn't have as many flowers as the other one, but it is doing well. This next tree is my gold nugget Loquat. I purchased this tree nearly 3 years ago, and it's been growing in this 10-gallon grow bag for almost a year and a half. And it was only standing about 20 inches tall when I bought it. And now it's about 5.5 feet tall. Still no fruit off of this one. And this is my black mission fig. This tree has not done as well as I had hoped. It's been growing in this 22-inch container for a little over 3.5 years. It hasn't done as well as I had hoped. The growth on the tree has been extremely limited. Last season, I cut this branch down to about half its size, the hope of encouraging new branching, which appears to have worked, as you can see here with these new branches that are starting to form. As soon as it goes dormant, I'll be cutting this other branch here down to about the same height, and hope it'll also branch out. Although it does have limited branching, what little fruit that it does manage to produce is a good size with excellent flavor. With any luck, in another season or two, it should do much better. And this other fig is my Little Miss Figgy fig tree. I have this one growing in a 15-gallon container. A while back I built the container you see there. My thinking back then was that I was going to plant this fig tree here in this section of my yard, but I've since had second thoughts. I'm not exactly sure if I'm going to be planting it here or if I'm going to put another fruit tree in this area and then just move this fig tree to my patio area. We'll see. It's done well growing in a container. It's just now starting to develop some fruit. The figs off this tree are fairly good size. They're dark on the outside with a red soft flesh on the inside. And this one is my Celeste fig tree. It's been growing in this 22-inch container for about 4 years. Of all my container grown fig trees, this one is the most productive. The figs are fair size. Last season I wound up harvesting about 50 figs off this tree. Around early February, while this tree was still dormant, I tipped most of the branches in order to encourage more fruit development. And once again, it appears that it's going to be starting to set a pretty good amount of figs. Most of the branches where I did the tipping have several figs that are forming, so I'm sure this season will be a pretty good harvest again. And here's my cherry of the Rio Grande. I bought this tree about 2 years ago, and it came in this large container. My plan for this one is to plant it in the ground in my front yard. I plan on re-landscaping the front, and I'm hoping to put this one in a small courtyard that I'm hoping to have someday. This backyard landscaping has been keeping me real busy, so the front will have to wait for a while longer. Last season it produced a fair amount of fruit, and earlier this year it pushed out a large number of flower buds, but unfortunately shortly afterwards some heavy winds in our area stripped most of the leaves off the tree, but it did manage to set some fruit. The fruit started to ripen in early May, and I've been going out and picking a few at a time each morning. The fruit starts off green, then it turns to a yellow shade of color, and then it changes to a little bit of an orange color, and then it'll turn to a red or a dark black color. You can pick them when they're red and they have good flavor, but if you want the sweetest flavor, you have to wait till they turn a real dark black color, and that's about the sweetest you'll get them. They have excellent flavor at that point. Last season it flowered twice, so I'm hoping in a few months from now I'll get a second bloom off this tree. And this is my Meyer lemon tree. It's been growing in this 22-inch container for over 4 years now. This one is a steady producer that is well suited for container growth. It started to bloom late February, early March, and as you can see, it appears to have set a good amount of lemons. There's still a few flower buds that are yet to bloom, but the majority have already bloomed and are starting to develop fruit. Although this tree is a bit small and compact, last season it still managed to produce somewhere around 40 lemons. The lemons are good size and are excellent for making lemonade. These are my honeyberry plants, which require cross-pollination, so you need 2 different varieties to get any fruit off of them. I'm not sure what the chill air requirement is for these, and I live in a low chill area, so I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get these to fruit, but I'll keep you posted and see what happens with these. And this is my 4-on-1 peach tree. I ordered this tree from an online nursery. It arrived with the taproot severely damaged, and I wasn't sure it would survive. I contacted the nursery and they sent out a replacement, which is this one here that I planted in this area. And it's doing really well, setting a good amount of fruit. The original one, it still managed to put on a good amount of fruit. I've already picked several off of it, and it still has a few left on there. The fruit is not all that big though. I didn't do that good of a job thinning this tree. I should have thinned it out quite a bit more than what I did. But the tree did survive and it is doing well. And lastly, here's another group of trees that I have growing in containers. Some of these will eventually be put in the ground, but I still need to prep the planting area, and I doubt I'll have time this season, so they'll likely be kept in containers for a while. This first tree on the left here is a Mao Lang fruit tree. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I'll list the name on the screen. I bought this one about a year ago. It was only standing about 23 inches tall when I purchased it, and it's put on a good amount of growth since then. Next is my blue lily pilly. This one was also purchased about a year ago, and it was standing about 27 inches tall when I bought it. And as you can see, it's doing really well and has put on a good amount of growth growing in this 7-gallon grow bag. And this next one is my jackfruit tree, which is growing in a 10-gallon grow bag. I bought this one a little over 2 years ago, and it was standing about 42 inches tall and really hasn't put on much growth. I don't think this is one of those trees that'll do well growing in a container, and I do hope to be able to put this one in the ground, but that won't be happening anytime soon, so for now I'll have to remain in this container. And here's my miracle berry plant. I bought it about 4 years ago, and this one is a very slow growing plant. It really hasn't put on much growth. I've had a bit of trouble finding a good place to keep this one. I've placed it in several sections of my yard, and every winter it struggles. That is until this last season where I found a new area where it seemed to be able to handle the cold weather a little better. And just in case you're not aware, this is a plant that will produce a small berry that once eaten, anything you eat after that will have a sweet flavor to it. Like if you bite into a lemon, instead of having a sour bitter taste, it'll have a sweet taste to it. The effect is only temporary and it only lasts for about 30 minutes to an hour. In the past, I've been able to harvest just a handful of these. So hopefully now that I've found a new place where it'll hopefully do better, I'll be able to get it to produce some fruit. And here is my goji berry. I bought this one about a year and a half ago. This is another one that does well as a container grown tree. It produces an abundant amount of small red berries, which I'm not particularly fond of the taste. They're a bit tart. The fruit, though, is supposed to have a lot of health benefits, so I think I'll try dehydrating my next harvest. Hopefully that will improve the flavor. And over here is my Hawaiian white guava, which is the tree on the right. I bought it a year and a half ago, and it came in a 5-gallon pot and was standing about 22 inches in height. 2 months ago, I transplanted it to the 7-gallon grow bag that it's in now. This other guava was also transplanted to this 7-gallon grow bag around the same time. I'm not really sure what variety this one is. It came up as a volunteer growing on my mother's property, but I believe it's a Mexican cream guava. It's doing really well and it's put on a good amount of growth. Neither of these have set any fruit. They're still a bit too young, but in another season or so they should be able to set some fruit. And this one here is my sherbet berry, which is just starting to come out of dormancy. I bought this one about 5 years ago. It was only about 20 inches tall, and it's put on a little bit of growth since. Last season it produced a fair amount of berries. Here's a quick video of the last bloom. As you can see, for a small tree, it does put on a fair amount of blooms. This is another one that I'm not particularly fond of the flavor. The blooms you see in this video resulted in the tree's very first harvest, so hopefully as the tree matures, the flavor and quality of the fruit will improve. Well, that'll be it for this video. Before closing, I'd just like to mention that the reason I made this video was to show you that even if you don't have a lot of room for planting in the ground, container growing can be a good option. There are several fruit trees that do well as container grown trees, and the ones in this video are just a few examples. So if you're thinking about buying some fruit trees but are a bit hesitant because you may not have the space to plant them in the ground, consider growing them in containers and you may be surprised how well they do. I hope you found this video informative and helpful, and as always, stay safe, grow your own, and thank you for watching.